Have you ever wondered why two calibers 7.62 and 5.45 are mainly used in infantry firearms? Even though the caliber measurement can vary in weapons from different countries, countries around the world still mainly use the 7s and 5s. Today, let's discuss a quite interesting and controversial topic that touches on one of the most famous personalities in the history of firearms, Mikhail Kalashnikov. We all know that the AK-47 and its modifications have become an icon among firearms. Later, Kalashnikovs of various modifications were produced for different cartridges. However, why did Mikhail Kalashnikov himself, the designer of this weapon, consider the reduction in caliber from 7.62 to 5.45mm a mistake? Let's figure it out. To understand this question, let's go back to the origins of the AK-74, the successor to the legendary AK-47. In the 1970s, during the Cold War, the Soviet military issued requirements for the development of a new automatic rifle. One of the main requirements was to reduce recoil and improve shooting accuracy. Kalashnikov and his team took on the task and decided to reduce the caliber from 7.62mm to 5.45mm, which in theory was supposed to improve the weapon's characteristics. Indeed, the AK-74 became lighter, recoil was reduced, and shooting accuracy increased. But was it really necessary to invent a new reduced caliber for this? The 20th century was an era of mass transition of the world's armies from 7.62mm to 5.56mm caliber. In the second half of the 20th century, the world's armies began to switch to a new cartridge for the most mass category of weapons, individual automatic firearms. The hype for this new type of ammunition for the main army firearms was largely spurred by American designers who in the 1960s released their first serial automatic rifle for the army. In the USA, a 5.56mm caliber cartridge was developed. Meanwhile, the USSR had its own similar caliber, 5.45mm. When compared with 7.62mm back in the 1950s, many significant advantages were identified. Smaller caliber cartridges had better flatness of trajectory, grouping, higher velocity, retained their kinetic energy longer, and traveled much farther. Although the 5.45mm cartridges faced serious difficulties when firing through brush and barriers, they caused much more severe wounds to living targets due to the tumbling bullet effect. Subsequent developments allowed for solving the above problem by improving the stability of the projectile's flight and, most importantly, increasing the armor penetration coefficient. Thus, it was practically proven at that time that there is no direct dependency between the effectiveness of a cartridge and its caliber increasing. The advantages were as follows. The new 5.45mm cartridges compared to the 7.62mm traveled an average of 100 meters farther. Moreover, a hit from the 5.45mm could cause a hydrodynamic effect inside the body of the enemy, tearing apart the target's internals and inflicting more damage than the 7.62mm cartridges. The 7.62mm sometimes had a similar effect, but most of such bullets simply passed straight through and left a neat hole provided that no bones were in the bullet's path. Additionally, switching to 5.45mm allowed increasing the amount of ammunition each soldier could carry, as the same 200 rounds of 7.62mm weighed as much as a whole 300 rounds of 5.45mm. Also, the recoil impulse when firing the 5.45mm was much lower, meaning it was easier for the operator of the new weapon to control the recoil and maintain more accurate fire. So, it seems we have only positives on paper. So why was Kalashnikov so strongly against moving from the 7.62mm to the 5.45mm? Here's the reason. The Soviet designer believed the transition to 5mm calibers was too premature and declared that the potential of the 7.62mm had not been exhausted. The gunsmith was convinced that the superiority of the 5.45 and 5.56 was only temporary and predicted that in 20 to 30 years, everyone around the world would be creating new modifications of the 7.62mm and the 5mm would be forgotten. Thus, Kalashnikov called the move away from the old caliber a major mistake, a waste of money, and feared that the army would eventually be left without a weapon with an effective cartridge. To some extent, he was right. In recent decades, individual protection technology has developed much more rapidly than offensive means. Today, soldiers in most countries wear Class 5 body armor, which confidently withstands hits from 5.45mm caliber bullets with BS type and even 7.62mm caliber bullets with BP type. Today, in the 21st century, all leading countries are creating new 7.62mm caliber cartridges and weapons specifically for it. Yes, the 5mm are much lighter and inflict more damage to the flesh, but the same 7mm have greater inertia and consequently less ricochet potential. This is especially important during various types of special operations to reduce hostages and in operations conducted within urban areas and city conditions. Such bullets, although they cause slightly less damage, focus more on accuracy of hitting targets, which is crucial when it comes to saving lives. And as we have already understood earlier, if we consider any wars, the choice will always be for the 7mm, as it will be easier for soldiers to penetrate the enemy's armor with this caliber, whereas the Soviet 5.45 and the American 5.56 seems not so great under modern conditions as they might have appeared at first glance. And it's a good thing the military managed to correct previous mistakes and eventually focus on the 7.62. Otherwise, at the start of any war, we would have to say, "Hey guys, please wait and don't attack us for about 10 years because our bullets aren't very effective right now." Debating between 7.62 versus 5.45 calibers is a popular topic, but when comparing 5.56 NATO with 5.45 Russian rounds, which are more effective? Both types of ammunition have their pros and cons, shaped by their design and military use. 5.56 NATO cartridge. Advantages. The 5.56 NATO is praised for its high muzzle velocity, which helps it maintain accuracy and effectiveness over long distances. It's versatile due to the availability of different bullet weights and the reloadability of brass cases. This makes it highly accessible and popular in both military and civilian use in the US. Disadvantages. On the downside, it can be pricier. Although it has lower recoil, which helps with quick follow-up shots, it may not create as significant damage as larger calibers, especially when penetrating barriers. 5.45 by 39mm cartridge. Advantages. Known for its unique bullet design, the 5.45 by 39mm round tends to tumble when it hits a target, causing large, severe wound channels with less chance of passing through the target, which could reduce collateral damage. It also has less recoil, which aids in better control and accuracy. Disadvantages. This caliber is not as widely available outside Eastern Europe, making it less accessible and often more expensive in other markets like the US. Early versions of this cartridge struggled with penetrating armor, which led to newer versions with improved performance. In summary, the 5.56 NATO is a go-to for its support and reloadability in the US, while the 5.45 by 39mm might appeal to those looking for specific performance in how it damages targets. The best choice often depends on personal needs, including the intended use and preferred weapon platform, such as AR-15 versus AK-74.